Americans today have their freedom to be fleeced, groped, wiretapped, censored, injected, disarmed, and maybe shot by government agents. Politicians are hell-bent on protecting citizens against everything except Uncle Sam. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch warns, quote, "We live in a world in which everything has been criminalized," unquote. Police lock up 10 million Americans a year, including anyone accused of even a very minor criminal offense such as an unbuckled seatbelt. Government decrees are blighting more lives than ever before. Politicians nowadays never lack a pretext for plundering private citizens. Despite being charged with no crime, 500,000 Americans have been robbed by government agents on the nation's sidewalks, highways, and airports in recent decades. Federal law enforcement agencies arbitrarily confiscate more property from Americans each year than all the burglars steal nationwide. Police have killed more than 25,000 citizens since the turn of the century, but the federal government does not even bother compiling a body count. SWAT teams use battering rams and flashbang grenades to attack 50,000 homes a year, routinely terrorizing people suspected of dastardly crimes like spraying graffiti or running poker games. Gun owners are America's fastest-growing criminal class. One state after another is enacting "show us the gun and we'll find the crime" laws. Federal agencies consider all 20 million marijuana users who own firearms to be felons, unless their last name is Biden. Politicians and bureaucrats exploited the COVID-19 pandemic to forbid any activities they chose, from going to church to buying garden seeds. Government officials endlessly invoked science and data to sanctify their power, but many pandemic policies were simply political science 101, using deceit and demagoguery to domineer humanity. Politicians are increasingly dividing Americans into two classes, those who work for a living and those who vote for a living. Thanks to endless vote-buying schemes, the number of handout recipients has more than doubled since 1983, and the feds are now feeding more than 100 million Americans. The ultimate victim of handouts could be democracy itself. Politicians cannot undermine self-reliance without subverting self-government. Taxes have become a financial grim reaper, and Americans are forced to pay more in taxes than their total spending on food, clothing, and housing. Inflation has become the cruelest tax, as the dollar's purchasing power fell 20% since Biden took office, fleecing any citizen with a savings account. The First Amendment is becoming a historic relic as the feds concoct one farcical ministry of truth after another. At the same time spying on citizens skyrocketed, Washington dropped an iron curtain around itself. The government is committing more crimes than citizens will ever know. Every year, the federal government slaps a secret label on trillions of pages of information, enough to fill 20 million filing cabinets. Self-government has been defined down to paying, obeying, and wearing a federal blindfold. There is a no-harm, no-foul attitude towards violating the Constitution, and Washington almost always hides the harm. Rather than the rule of law, we have a government of threats, intimidation, and browbeating. Government of the people defaulted into government for the people, which degenerated into perpetually punishing people for their own good. The authoritarian trend line in American political life is more important than the name or party of any office holder. We have an impunity democracy in which politicians pay no price for their crimes. Americans today are more likely to believe in witches, ghosts, and astrology than to trust the federal government. Washington's legitimacy is in tatters thanks to a long train of bipartisan perfidy. If government is lawless, elections merely designate the most dangerous criminals in the land. At a time when foreign democracies are collapsing like dominoes, can America avoid becoming the elective despotism the Founding Fathers dreaded? The first step to reviving liberty is to recognize how far politicians have stretched their power. Americans must never forget that the most dangerous inequality is that between the rulers and the ruled. Liberty is invaluable regardless of how many politicians seek to destroy it or how many fools fail to cherish it. But nothing can safeguard freedom except the bravery of citizens who refuse to be shackled.